And now it's time for Fabulous Film and Friends. This week on Fabulous Film and Friends, it's time to embrace our inner sap as we compare two seminal, historically themed weepie romances that have managed to endure despite being laden with copious amounts of kettle corn, enough to fill two silos full, really. 1980's Somewhere in Time, written by Richard Matheson, directed by Jeannot Szwarc, starring Christopher Reeve, Jane Seymour, and Christopher Plummer, against 1997's Titanic, written and directed by James Cameron, and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, Billy Zane, David Warner, Francis Fisher, and Kathy Bates. I'm your host, Gino Caputi, and this week I have a full cast of romantics on my side. The King of Salt Lake City, Burton Brown, my kid sister and James Cameron biographer and enthusiast, Roseanne Caputi, Joe Field, the most sensitive author and hypnotherapist in Texas, and Mr. Rom-com himself, George Young. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Hey there.
No funny voices and jokes tonight. It's all about the love. So before we jump into the abyss, the synopses. Somewhere in Time's Richard Collier is an up-and-coming college playwright who, following a successful and highly touted college production, is visited by an elderly woman who hands him a gold watch and whispers, "Come back to me." 8 years later, Richard, now a successful playwright in Chicago, goes on a bit of an unscheduled vacation to overcome writer's block, stopping at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island in Michigan. In the hotel museum, he sees a photo of Elise McKenna, an incomparably beautiful and famous actress from the turn of the 20th century, and he is immediately captivated and obsessed with learning all about her. Upon discovering that Elise was the woman who handed him the gold watch, he wills himself back in time to the year 1914 to meet her through a form of hypnosis. And when they meet, fireworks! But can their love stand the test of time? Titanic recounts the heartrending love affair of poor artist Jack Dawson and the high society dame Rose DeWitt Bukater, who met and fell in love on the doomed ocean liner 4 days before it hit an iceberg and sunk on that fateful night in 1912. But can their love survive tragedy? Roseanne, as a fellow gang captain, choose your weapons, whether they be rocks, bricks, chains, blades, zip guns, or just plain old Richard Beimer style bare-knuckled fists, because I still love Titanic.
Wow.
Again, I will say when watching it side by side with Somewhere in Time, I don't hate it as much because I can just look at it as like another schlocky romance. But elbow in the ribs worthy in the movie theater? I don't think so.
That's an inside joke. I was in '97. I liked Titanic. Roseanne, the quintessential literature snob, hated it, and I kept elbowing her. We saw it again. Like we both said, I'm going to prove it. It's a great movie, and I kept elbowing her every time something awesome happened. And Roseanne was getting irritated with me.
And I would elbow back every time something was super lame. And I feel like I got... Anyway.
Not sure who won that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Here we are today.
So here we are today. I don't know. I guess I was in the mood. But let's go around the panel. George Young, you're no stranger to romance. Which film do you think is better? And which film do you think, or why do you think both films endure? But which film is better to start off with?
Well, Somewhere in Time is a far superior movie and holds up much better than Titanic. Titanic, I cursed you the whole time I watched it for the second time since 1997 because I thought it was a bloated mess back then, and I haven't changed my opinion. Leonardo DiCaprio looks like he's dating his mother. The chemistry between them, I haven't seen less on-screen chemistry until I saw Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum
yeah.
just like a few months ago. They had no chemistry whatsoever, but then I realized she's about 45 and he's 17, so no wonder it didn't work. But I'm not trying to be glib. I just think Titanic is an awful film, and I am a big fan of Richard Matheson, and I'll give you the inside joke on Somewhere in Time. Jack Finney, their work with time travel where you don't need a degree in quantum physics to make it all happen. So hopefully I've answered your question, but I don't think it's any contest.
Interesting.
Yep.
Bert, what do you got? What do you think? Do you like one film better than the other, and why do you think they endure?
I have to say I like Titanic better. I don't, not exactly why. And I'm not a huge Christopher Reeve fan.
Really?
Let
Let me just stop you right there. I'm more because of Christopher Reeve, because of Somewhere in Time. I'm more of a Christopher Reeve fan than ever. So
well, that's true.
continue.
It's better than, but I really only knew him from Superman. So going in, it's like, oh, I don't know what he's like. I've always heard he was a good actor, but that meant nothing to me. And I don't know. My wife watched it. She saw the little picture of who was in it. Oh no, she thought it was a Superman movie, and so she sat through it, and she didn't even really like it. But I'm not sure. I thought it was okay. I didn't hate it. And then Titanic I watched today after driving back home.
It's a long ass day, Bert.
I know.
Boy, talk about being pummeled.
I didn't have time in Idaho to watch it, so I figured I'd watch it when I got back.
What else did you have time for in Idaho?
Cleaning my mom and dad's house for them while they're sitting around. But no, it was, I didn't see Titanic in the movie. I didn't get wore out by the theme song because I didn't listen to that type of music back when it was popular. And
you listen to cool music?
I don't know. It was probably Christian music or something, but it wasn't that music. And so I didn't get wore out of it. And everybody's talking about this song of Celine Dion. I'm like, what are you talking about?
I can't find it anywhere.
You had ears in 1997 and 1980.
What were you doing? Just walking around with a bucket on your head?
I just didn't go to movies, and then I went to.
Dude, it was
I probably saw it
everywhere.
I remember going for a jog, and there were like girls on a balcony, like all like 12-year-old girls, all singing it like only 12-year-old girls.
Well, that doesn't, just because you hear someone else sing it doesn't mean you hear the good version of it.
I'm just saying it was everywhere. It was
I'm amazed.
No, I know it,
Jackson's
but I
Beat It or
hadn't heard the
Thriller.
whole thing. I'd only heard bits and pieces, and I hadn't seen the movie, and I think I finally rented it, back when Blockbuster or something was around. I don't know.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Joe, what do you got?
I much preferred Somewhere in Time. I had never seen either of these movies before. I knew a lot more about Titanic going into it just because it's everywhere. Pop culture references, memes, music, what have you. But there were a lot of aspects of Titanic that just felt too much and kind of cheesy. I didn't like the framing narrative behind it all. I felt like the movie could have started 20 minutes in and it would have been more powerful as it was. I felt like the whole framing narrative's purpose was to show off how much James Cameron researched this and was like, I know what I'm doing.
You know that it was.
I know what I'm doing here. See, look at this. And it's
I've been down there.
God, the exposition. My God, the exposition.
Well, and add to that, I mean, I'm going to get into what doesn't work. I'm going to specifically ask what doesn't work in each film. But what really doesn't work is that fat fucking nerd. Like, who in their right mind would behave like that around anybody?
Anybody.
Like, wasn't the scene where Bill Paxton takes a fly swatter and hit him in the head and say, "Shut up, asshole! She's a survivor." No, it's stupid. There's so much that's stupid in this movie. Let's keep going. All right, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I actually like. I mean, I have my problems with Somewhere in Time, but just overall, I found that I enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting to. Like, yeah, there's a lot of sappiness in it, but I felt like actually the characters had really good chemistry.
Yeah, well, that's what got me on this kick.
And I much preferred the soundtrack as well. But
whoop, whoop, John Barry.
Well, as a James Horner fan, that was not his best for sure.
No.
Yeah.
And I do generally like James Horner, but it was just a lot
it's
of.
I think it's a terrible score. It's a total Enya ripoff. It's when I first heard it, I was stunned. It's like this is note for note Enya's Book of Days. Like he just, I mean, they wanted Enya, and then James Horner just went where he shouldn't have gone, which is I'm just gonna rip her off wholesale.
Even the background ethereal singing that
it's awful.
overlays
It's
the
awful.
soundtrack is very Enya.
It's awful. I think it's an awful score, honestly.
But but yeah, and I felt like it was a movie that kind of it didn't rush, but it like pacing wise felt pretty good. I mean, again, I have my complaints with certain things, but it kind of just it didn't stay too long, I guess. Like it was a good length. It wasn't the 3-hour Titanic wreck that Titanic was, in my opinion. So.
All right, Roseanne, you're up. Why did you can't deny it, both films haven't endured. So why do you think that is so, and which film is better?
The question about why they endured is actually, I can't imagine in a lot of ways why Titanic has endured, except for its visuals and the water dynamics that James Cameron is known for. To me, Somewhere in Time is an interesting love story that has elements of time travel in it. And to me, Titanic is just like a hardcore spazzing nerds Titanic wet dream with this like romance thrown in for good luck. To give it
let me break in real quick.
Focus.
Let me break in real quick. The reason why we're doing these two films is I had never noticed it before, but felt it in my subconscious. I feel it was James Cameron's version of Somewhere in Time.
And I think so. And I think that's how James Cameron, unfortunately, approaches women and romance. And it's true. Kate Winslet looks 4,000 years old. She looks like a French mime. It's the worst. And with that full face of makeup. But I think it really worries me that like genuine romances that people want to watch are so few and far between that people take anything, because I don't know why Titanic has endured. It hasn't to me. Like
it's
2 hours in,
It's
I'm still looking
there.
at my son saying, God, when do they start effing dying already? Because that's finally when I'm interested in the movie. And Somewhere in Time, like Joe said, like they have genuine chemistry. It's kind of it's an interesting little story. And I think it is, I like, as underwritten as it is, I like the concepts of time travel that go into it.
Well, I had go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. No,
I had a Spirit comic book where a mad scientist says, "That's it. I've been condensed time into a liquid." And you just have to drink time. So
time in a bottle. Fine.
The story and the Spirit was Will Eisner. He's totally like a psycho comic book where this guy's rippling in and out of time. But you're going, okay, I buy that concept. And there's that meme about like how many of you didn't try to like ever like grab something with the Force? I did. After seeing Somewhere in Time, try to do the hypnotist field and try to will myself back into the 40s. Well, I just gave it a shot. I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me try it. So it's a simple device that now I go, boy, that's just so thin. Okay, but I like it. I like it, but there's a very tenuous thing. Yeah, there's a very tenuous thing about how could that possibly work if you're going to be reminded by a nickel or a penny?
Okay, but it's so much better. It's so much better than listening to like an effing Marvel movie when they're trying to get Ant-Man back in time and all this garbage. And I just prefer like, well, it happened and here we are.
Yeah, no, I know
and now there's two very attractive, lovely stars having like a very sappy yet effective romance.
And I gotta say this: there's a very few movies in my life where I've seen as a kid or when I was younger, where I remember nearly every frame of it, and Somewhere in Time is one of those. And I do attribute that to Richard Matheson's economy with storytelling. It's like this movie, I saw it when I was 12 or so. Then put it away, liked it, but didn't love it. Just I saw it on TV. Then I come back to it right like a month ago before I decided on this podcast, and I'm like, wow, I remember nearly every scene like it was yesterday. So I think it just has this sort of, it just the stars again. The Christopher Reeve, like suddenly I was going, that son of a bitch is really good looking. He never really had it. They really typecast these guys in the 70s and 80s. Like he's a great actor and handsome as the day is long. We all took him, the poor guy, for granted, you know? And it's like, he's really good in this. And I've never been much of a Jane Seymour fan, but the two of them together are dynamite. They just are, you know? And that's why the movie, the Christopher Plummer stuff, horrible. Like, what the hell is this? You know, it's almost as bad as Billy Zane.
No,
you know?
it's daffy for sure. But I do think if we're talking, you know, enduring, I just think, well, they do have chemistry, and there's enough of an interesting time travel. Again, before this, how many time travel romances were there?
Right. Well, there was Time After Time, which had just
the year before.
Yeah, it just come out. But anyway, let me just finish up Titanic. Meanwhile, Titanic's a movie. Obviously, I liked it. I was a huge James Cameron fan. I liked it when it first came out. It's the kind of movie that so much of it is terrible that you just think you hate it. But I will say it still works. Just like Somewhere in Time works, Titanic, I think Somewhere in Time has way more star appeal. You guys are obviously right. I mean, Kate Winslet and what's his face are on their own fine, but together they're not a good couple. But in their individual scenes they're fine in the movie, you know. But I just still get sucked into the, like, you know, this, I always want to hate this movie because it's so stupid and so much of it doesn't work, and we're going to talk about what doesn't work because a lot of it doesn't work, but it still comes together and works by the end. And I still think, you know, this having worked, George, I can certainly, not only is your house flooded, but you worked in the film business where everybody runs around pretending they're in authority when they have no idea what the heck they're talking about. And it just reminds me of being on a film set where you're just winging it, and all those, you know, whatever the company, the White Star, you know, employees just lying their ass off, and then like shutting down locking the gates on the people in steerage. It's like, yeah, this feels like life, and he's very good at that. Like the whole movie suddenly just snaps into focus and becomes excellent. So I still think, I still like the movie. So that's that. But going around the room, Bert, I'll start with you. What works in each film? What do you think works well in each film?
Well, I had never seen Somewhere in Time before. It wasn't a type of movie I would have gone to see when it came out. Certainly the romance between those two works. Like you guys have already stated that there was that, you know, I can't remember the word it is, but they worked well together and it showed. You know, they clicked together. Some other word you guys used.
Chemistry, baby.
Chemistry between them. Yeah.
And let's just add that Jane Seymour revealed recently at like one of these conventions, because they have conventions on Mackinac Island where they watch this film and talk to the cast. She and Christopher Reeve were having a bit of an affair while they were making the movie.
I did read that.
And it shows. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So that worked. And then we just want to know what worked.
Yeah, for now.
I thought worked. Okay.
You know, Roseanne will pull out the red ledger when we say what doesn't work for Titanic.
Yeah, the Titanic side, what worked? You guys have already talked about the relationship being weird, and it clearly was. But I guess the story, you know, the non-love story of the movie worked. You know, the background stuff that was going on, like you said, they locked the steerage. They really looked down on those that were beneath them, you know, the rich people and the poor people. I thought that was, well, as far as I know, it was portrayed accurately, where there was just a class of people, and would they have would the White Star Line have let the rich people on the boats first? Probably.
I think that's all pretty well
So
documented.
That is,
Yeah, that's all pretty well
Yeah.
documented. But
So
he
that
got to give
worked
him
to
credit.
me,
he does a good job depicting all that. I think he
Right,
does.
right. And that, the
Yes,
relationship was
Roseanne.
just
When
weird.
I think when all that when everything's when the ship is flooding, I think it all seems pretty realistic to me.
Right.
Okay.
That's it.
George, what do you got? What works in each film?
Well, my contempt for Titanic um, will prevent me from pointing out anything that works extremely well. However, to the point of visual effects, especially given that it was 1997, I have to say that they were pretty effective.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot else that I have to tell you, I squirmed for the 72 hours that I had to sit in the theater the first time I watched it. And rewatching it, it was like a Joe Bob Briggs review. I had about 90 hours to kill the other day, so I decided to watch The English Patient.
Mhm.
So that's how Titanic feels to me. It's just long. And yeah, I have an appreciation for how much work the combination of practicality and digital effects were joined together actually pretty seamlessly. So, kudos to Cameron for being that obsessive about it. And obviously what worked.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What's
Go ahead.
that?
Nothing. I was about to bring up my arguments, but go ahead. Sorry. I think everybody's
and time
dismissing
after
something
time.
I think is pretty good about that, but I'll let you talk before I blabber. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Somewhere in Time to me is just really an exposition in, if you want to call it love at first sight, and then the capability of Richard Matheson on the heels of working with Jack Finney to convince the audience or the reader in their various books, which are just outstanding, that you can travel through time, without having to put yourself in a wayback machine.
Right.
There's that concept of things exist in 1890 that are still like the Dakota, which is one of Jack Finney's stories that takes place at the Dakota. If you take a room at the Dakota, it hasn't changed since it was built. Now, not all the rooms are like that, but those particular ones are like that because you can look out over Central Park from the Dakota, and it looks like Central Park from 1890. You can't see any overhead wires. You can't see any traffic on 72nd Street or Central Park West. That's why they kept the rooms the way that they did. Finney's take on it, and I know that Matheson borrowed it, is that you are still in 1890 if you were in that room. Okay, psychologically, you could convince yourself of that fact. That's how Chris Reeve travels.
Yeah.
And that to me is such a great device because as Finney, and I saw Jack Finney interviewed right before he passed away, he said, no one's going to care about the time travel device if you tell a great story. And I think Somewhere in Time is just a great story.
Well, okay. I think it's very good. It's very memorable. I think it lends itself to not being a nerd and snorting and going, how come he didn't wake when he went to sleep on the bench? How come he didn't wake up and think, where the hell am I? Forget that. But there is this element of nothing happens. And because
Okay, but we have to things that work. Don't we get to that in a second? Things that don't work.
Sure.
Just
Sure. Sorry, I'm getting ahead. I'm so excited.
saying.
I'm so excited. These are two exciting films.
God.
All right, Joe, what do you think
Agreed.
What do you think works if you honestly analyze both films as much as you dislike Titanic?
Sure. I think I'm starting with Titanic. There were a couple of performances that I did actually really like. I think particularly, and again, these are mostly side characters, but I generally liked Bernard Hill as sort of the captain of the Titanic. Yeah. I thought that like a lot of his acting was really good. I mean, he didn't say a whole lot throughout the movie, but you kind of get the sense of this heavy weight of like, I am responsible for this. What have I done?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I'm gonna go down with the ship, kind of, without even saying that.
Yeah.
So So I think his performance is really good. I like the ship engineer also kind of having a similar sense of like
Victor Garber.
yeah, like this
Yeah.
is
Jesus Christ
everything's gonna fall
Superstar
apart.
himself.
Whoa.
No, I'm sorry. Godspell himself.
Yeah. So, and then I also, with some issues, I did also like Kathy Bates' character, who I thought had at least added some color, even if her accent was kind of all over the place at times.
She's on the list of all the things that don't work for me. But
Okay,
anyway.
sure. I like something a little bit different to kind of mix up the sort of otherwise monotony of high class society.
Oh, she's a fine character. She really exists. She's just, I think, poorly cast. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were a few things that I did like. I think that there were some really cool visual moments, such as the propellers lifting up, for example.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in moments like that where it's like, oh, you really get a sense of the scale of this thing.
No, it's very reminiscent of 9/11 now. I mean, it all happened before, right? You know, so suddenly you watch it now, you go, boy, this really is, well, there's this huge, huge tragedy and catastrophe. And he does do a good job of punctuating it. I don't care what anybody says. It's still like, this is still a good scene, you know, a good sequence.
Yeah. So I think those were some things that I liked about Titanic, or I thought worked pretty well. For Somewhere in Time, I mean, I already talked about the chemistry for the characters, but I also like the characters on their own quite a bit. I think that Christopher Reeve, I also, similar to Bert, like, I only knew him from, like, Superman. And I found him to be very likable in this movie, just on his own. Like, occasionally a little bit dorky, but, like, a real character. Like, he wasn't trying to be this, like, always constantly suave heartthrob, but, like, just a guy who's, like, trying to get to know her. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to have to recite this. How am I going to approach her? And all these different things. So I think that he did really well. I think that she also, like, a lot of visual just acting, like, without even having to speak, was able to say a lot with just her expressions. I think the emphasis on the movie, I feel like, isn't the science of, like, how you're able to travel back in time. I like that it was a short, like, oh yeah, just
will yourself,
hypnotize myself and just went back in time.
You should know, right?
You
I mean, just lie down and just make it happen.
Oh,
Yeah, and I also,
you don't get it. You just don't get it.
you know,
That's his next book.
I'm sorry, you don't get it. So, okay, fine.
you know, I mean, and I'll say, like, as far as, like, media Hollywood interpretations of how hypnosis works, that's not the worst one that I've seen. So, I mean, granted, I don't think there's any hypnosis that can do that. That'd be very interesting, but it wasn't as terrible a representation as a lot of other movies have been. So I'm willing to kind of let that slide. And I think otherwise, like, I mean, also I think in both movies costuming is pretty good. So I think that feeling like you're kind of transported back works well in both movies. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much most of what I found were some of the better elements. And also the music for Somewhere in Time.
Well, for John Barry, anyway, I don't love it as John Barry goes, because he did way better. He did that on the cheap and, like, quickly. And if you read the Wikipedia page, he was a friend of Jane Seymour's, and it was a low budget production. And she said, "Hey, we got this great movie. Can you score it?" And he went, "Oh, sure, of course." And and then but I find the score a little I think it's part of the sappiness is his score. But anyway, it's a favorite score. People love it. It's one of those soundtrack, as a soundtrack collector, everybody always, it's on that list of scores that people constantly buy, which I've never understood, because I'm like, it's not that good. But anyway, Roseanne, you're up. What works in each film? And are you going to say Billy Zane?
I am going to say Billy Zane. I find him to be entertaining and to understand. Talk about Nickelodeon. Anyway, I think again, I like the fact that it, I guess, harkens back to, and we've talked about this, Twilight Zone episodes and things like this, where the conceit is there, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is the performances and again, how we feel. And so I like that form of storytelling where we don't get bogged down in these details and we never know these characters. I really like Christopher Reeve's performance because, like Joe said, he is goofy. Like it's more of a physical performance than you would think. Like when he's sort of like fake dancing next to that guy in the hotel before he cuts in on Jane Seymour. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. And it adds to his charm.
I think it's a more like Christopher Reeve performance of any movie he ever did.
I think that's probably
he's
true.
being himself. I think he's like, he doesn't have to be Superman. He seems like that's how Christopher Reeve is, you know? Like,
well, and so it's really endearing. And the other thing is too, I'm thinking about this because we were talking about it with Gambit earlier, so sorry, but that I think as he is easy to fall in love with based on these sort of like endearing, goofy quirks. And so even though it is kind of a love at first sight thing, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, I think it does just because I think we all kind of sort of collectively fall in love with him. So then when Jane Seymour does her scene in the play, it feels a little bit more earned. So I definitely, you know, and again, they really do have so much in common. Staircases, shouting, whispering in ears, promises, you know, all.
Don't forget pictures, and don't forget art, and don't forget artifacts. A watch and a necklace. I mean, yes. I think he, in a way, I think, boy, he really took. He just said it's like a kid who has to do a project and goes, sees Somewhere in Time the night before and goes, sets to work work on his Titanic script, you know? Like,
right.
Wait a minute, I never thought about it until seeing it this last time. I went, you know, this. I always remembered the ending of Titanic, thinking I've seen that ending somewhere. Where have I seen it? Because I hadn't seen Somewhere in Time since I was a kid. But I'm like, oh right, Titanic. Or like
also,
Somewhere in Time.
That first thing of hers from 1912, so it's really, you know, it has very similar turn of the century kind of stuff. And so anyway, I just think there's actually, I think more, we will pick it apart, but there's more that I'm willing to forgive in Somewhere in Time, and that lends to what works. The fact that I'm willing to forgive all the bad production and the questions and the ridiculousness makes it work more as a movie. Whereas Titanic, what works is sound design. And that's what I'm gonna say.
All right, everybody.
How about the key grip?
Hold on.
You gotta make sure that was good.
Hold on to your hats. I'm gonna now talk. I'm gonna do some talking. George, stifle your yawns, George. Here goes.
Oh, so good.
Okay, so number one, what I think works above all in Somewhere in Time is that Twilight Zone economy of storytelling creepiness. It is creepy. If the fact that she does that come home to me or come back to me scene is like a Twilight Zone episode. It just is, and it works really well. And the only, again, before we go, it doesn't work. It's just a shame Jane Seymour wasn't giving a little bit more to work with on the sort of eternal love stage, you know, in terms, because when she says, "Is it you?" That would be great if we had some inkling that this was always meant to happen and she knew it was going to happen because there's a time loop or whatever it is. So I just feel like, we don't quite get her. But what works, I think, is just the sort of, the sort of eerie supernatural quality of it all. I think that's what works and what's most effective. Why I did sort of remember it all my life is because I thought, this is like it feels like a Twilight, like that was his stock and trade. You know, his best Star Trek episode is Twilight Zone-ish of Captain Kirk. He wrote The Enemy Within, where Captain Kirk divides into two people, and that's a great script. It really is. It's a very insightful script about human nature. And he wrote like Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, and he wrote The Little Girl Lost, and he wrote I forget all the Twilight. Somebody look it up. he wrote some of the best Twilight Zone episodes. In addition to I Am Legend, and I've never read this novel, but you know, if you think of all that he wrote, this guy was amazing. He's like one of these great writers that really, I mean, obviously science fiction people recognize him, but Americans, is he in any anthologies of great American writers?
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of.
He's a good writer. I mean, his stories
Okay.
have definitely endured, you know. Anyway, so I really like the overall story and the feel, the supernatural feel to it. Titanic, I do think, as clunky as it is, and we will get into what doesn't work, and there's just, you know, enough to fill a volume, but it does remind me of that book by Norman Maclean, who did The River Runs Through It, one of the few books I have read, Young Men in Fire, where the lesson learned, and Young Men in Fire is not a narrative. It's more of a biography, or it's nonfiction. So it's basically Norm Maclean figuring out what happened in the smoke jumper, the early smoke jumpers from I think the 40s, right? It's been a while since I read it. But anyway, the point is he goes on and on throughout this book, trying to find how these guys die. And he brings one of the guys' father out there. And then the father starts shaking uncontrollably and turns white and starts just bawling because his son died at that spot. And then he says, "Oh, geez, Louise. I was all caught up in the forensics of it all. It never occurred to me that human beings died here." And I think that in James Cameron's defense, he does make this point pretty well. As obvious and awkward as he does it, I think, yeah, there is something memorable about this film beyond just the effects. I think everybody here, except me, is selling the film short. I think there is a sort of poignant message there about the tragedy of the Titanic that I think, well, there is something memorable about this film. It's not a forgettable film. So that's all I'll say. All right, going around the room. What doesn't work? George Young, Titanic.
Oh, well,
okay, the number one thing that doesn't work.
the number one thing. Okay,
Pick one.
I do think it's the connection, or I should say the lack of the connection between the two leads. I mean, that's paramount. If you're going to do a movie that sort of engineers itself off of this faux relationship on the Titanic, then you better have two people who make a connection, and it just doesn't work at all, not even a little.
I'm going to push back a little bit because obviously the movie wouldn't have made $2 billion if
We're idiots. We're cheap. Okay?
Yeah, but I think there's something between the two of
everybody
them.
had to like stampede to the theater. There's a joke about the Academy Awards. 3 years in a row, we had the ruthlessness of the English people, the what was it? The betrayal of the English people, and the incompetence of the English people, all winning Academy Awards. Braveheart, English Patient, and then Titanic.
Yeah.
So, but people get into these like corrals of, especially back then. Now, not so much now because of streaming services, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have to go see Titanic. I mean, we can't show up at high school tomorrow if we don't. And the same thing happened with The English Patient, which is another terrible movie.
Well, let's not get too far into that, but I think you're taking away from the natural charm of the actors, because I'm watching it again. I'm like, yeah, DiCaprio is much, because I don't like him. I've been pretty vocal about how much I think he tries too hard. But I think in this film, he's naturally charming and handsome in it. And he walks around. I do think they are an odd couple, but I don't, like I keep saying, I think, well, they have something. They do have star power.
Well, fine. But I mean, again, you're building a romance and the tragedy of loss around two people.
Around a 12-year-old. Like, that's how it feels.
Between a
likable 12-year-old.
Right. A plucky 12-year-old. I'm just like, what? This doesn't work at all.
So to me, that is a major miss. So if it's the number one, if you're looking for the number one thing that doesn't work, well, I think that's it.
Back then, I used to think it should have been Christian Slater, but now I'm thinking he should have cast Christian Bale, That, in
Oh.
fact, hot off of Little Women, he would have been a great lead
Well, it would have been
with
good
Kate
'cause
Winslet.
he would have weighed more than Kate did.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You
I-
never
He had
get the
him-
feeling that
He
he
had
can
him by a
protect
good
her
20
because he
pounds.
right.
I think he could have pulled off all aspects. I think he could have pulled off the physical aspects and the young sort of like artiste from Minnesota.
Wisconsin.
Well, Wisconsin, that's right.
Wisconsin, right,
Yeah,
that's right.
What's
Yeah.
the difference? All right, Bert, what do you got? What doesn't? Oh wait, have you said what doesn't work? No, sorry, we moved on to what doesn't work in Somewhere in Time, George.
Well, very little because I'm just so enamored of that capability of someone to bring to the screen that concept of time travel again without needing a degree in quantum physics. And I do think that obviously the chemistry between the two of them is outstanding. I don't know, Gino. I mean, I'm not going to call it a perfect movie, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, there ain't a whole lot wrong with it. And watching it again after 44 years, pretty remarkable about how well it holds up. So I'm hard pressed to think of what quote unquote doesn't work in the movie. I'll think about it.
Listen in because I got some stuff. All right,
I'm sure you do.
Joe, what do you got? What works? What doesn't?
No,
Or
that's
what-
what-
Or not, sorry, what doesn't
work?
work? What doesn't work in each film?
Okay.
And you got to boil Titanic down to its essence because there's a lot.
Sure. Yeah, man, I'm really trying to struggle between two things for Titanic. I would say that at its central, these are two. I didn't like the characterization for the two leads. I think that these are two adults who are throughout the movie acting like 12-year-olds and
they're
seem
supposed
to
to
have
be.
the mental capacity of this. I mean, like, and this is even like, and everything down to like some of these angles, like when they're dancing and it's like you're doing the camera angle of like, woo, we're going around in a circle and stuff like that. It's like, this is so juvenile.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it feels like in each of these moments that it's like, oh, look, we're being so fun and carefree and doing all this stuff. And it's like, you're adults, right?
She's
Like-
17, right? She's 17. I think they said she's 17.
I think that's right.
Is she? Okay.
She's 17. So she's still. He's maybe 20. She's 17.
Yeah, I definitely didn't get all of that from.
No, they
either of the
mention
actors.
it. Yeah, they mention it.
But yeah, it struck me as just very, like, I don't know, immature, and also like, I just didn't buy them as a couple, I guess.
Yeah,
And
there's
that,
definitely
like,
that.
And I mean, that's sort of the whole idea of this. And I mean, her changing her name to his last name and holding him as a flame for all these years, and you know,
Yet still getting
what is
married
it?
and having kids.
Yeah, right.
At the very least, dummy, have her get knocked up by Jack Dawson. Like it is pretty stupid. Like, wait, she didn't get
Gino,
pregnant?
You're forgetting the important point that a woman's heart is a deep ocean of
Deep
mystery,
ocean.
right?
Don't start on the groaners. The
I
groaners.
was gonna say.
There's a lot of groaners
Wow.
for sure. Yeah.
So, anyways, but yeah, I that's sort of I feel like if I had liked them more, I had felt they had more chemistry, and maybe even if they were cast a little bit differently, I would
think
have
she's
liked
fine.
the movie a lot more.
I think she's fine. DiCaprio, unfortunately, was like because of Romeo and Juliet at that time. He was the heartthrob, and boy, did they love him in Japan. And you know, it was this thing. So he was bound to bring in the girls, and did he. But it's a strange couple for sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
moving
their
on.
Sex scene feels like felonious.
I know it does. Well, it's just so awful. It's gross.
It's the worst.
Gross.
It's
The
gross.
spitting and the
It's
sex are
sweaty, it's
gross.
gross.
Like I always feel like when the guys are looking for them and open the door, there should be a big puddle there. You know? Like you know, like
Sweaty
yuck,
weirdos. Yuck.
yeah, blimey. You know?
steerage is warm, I guess.
No, it's just
Like
the
a
worst.
felonious rainforest
No,
sweat.
if could anything get cut from that film, it's that sex scene. I just think it's so stupid. But anyway.
Anyway, sorry, Bert. My bad.
Oh wait, no,
Oh, that wasn't me.
Joe has not answered what doesn't work in Somewhere in Time.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. This one's a little tougher, but I kind of I would have liked to have had more. What I think didn't work as well is the ending, and specifically how quickly it kind of ended after. I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time with him sort of grieving this and trying out different things only for nothing to work. And then maybe coming to this realization of, like, well, like, the only way to kind of be reunited is basically to die.
Yeah.
Because as it was in the movie, it's like, okay, he's going to try this hypnosis, tries it a couple of times, fails, and then just mopes around for a little bit, and then end of movie. I think
He doesn't, it's a little top heavy. I would say the film is top heavy. He tries a lot to get back there and then doesn't try at all then he just dies.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh, this is sad. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were him, I think I probably would have gone to the professor and been like, do you have any other suggestions? Like, I'm trying to go back and stuff. How would you accomplish it again, you know? But none of that. It just kind of ends a little too quickly for me. So I think that's something that needed work.
Very good point. Joe, that's exactly what I think. I have other things. But, Bert, go ahead. Doesn't work about Titanic. Only one. You can only pick one.
Only one. Right. Boy, I just watched it. I thought there was a lot. It was enough for me to notice that sometimes there was what I considered overperforming. I know what that means in singing.
Boy, Bert, you're just a man of the heartland. You took mine way right from me.
Oh, well, it's like, wow, that was over the top.
Well, let me join you. Let me join you and give you, because I'm good. It's the casting. Everybody is miserably cast. All the leads are miserably cast, from Bill Paxton on down. Gloria Stuart sounds like she's reading a freaking cookie recipe. She's terrible. Joe mentioned Bernard Hill. He's all the people in, like, the British, all the evil British people. They're pretty good. They're all fine if they actually make the film work. It's everybody from Kathy Bates to Francis Fisher. Billy Zane's, of course, having fun, so he's okay as the mustache twirling villain. But the casting for sure is just miserable. The Danny Nucci, the Italian guy. Everybody's
it's a Titanic.
The Irish guy. The Irish guy seems unimaginative. Like, that's the best Irish guy you could find in Hollywood. And then Jeannot, what's her face, Goldstein from Aliens as the Irish.
Oh my God, as the Irish mom.
She's awful.
Yeah.
They're all freaking awful. Victor Garber's okay. Bernard Hill's okay. Even the pompous ass who's this Freud? Is he a passenger? He's fine. I mean, he's a little over the top, but everybody else is just terrible. Like, they're all terrible. Especially
so that's
Kathy
what didn't
Bates.
work for me.
Yeah, sorry, but I just want to jump on
That's okay.
I want to jump because that's my number one thing. Like, everybody's pretty annoying in this film.
But I
Anyway.
think you saying overperforming is a really good way to say it. I think everyone really is. And they're overperforming because they're the wrong people.
Yeah, maybe. Or the director wasn't good enough to get it out of them.
Well,
I don't know who you blame.
Speaking of my flaws list.
All right, what do you got on Somewhere in Time?
Well, that one was a hard one for me. I mean, the romance is fine. That was no big deal. Honestly, what I wrote down the first time, because I didn't know what to expect, was I thought the old lady was a bit of a caricature, overdone.
Good casting, though. She looks like Jane Seymour.
It was a very small role.
Yeah.
But it was I thought, is this trying to be Whistler's mother? Or is it trying to be Psycho mother? The mother from Psycho in the rocking chair? But I didn't, again, I had no concept of what this movie was going to turn into. That was just my first impression of what I was looking at the beginning. But then I knew it was supposed to be a romance, so I knew it wasn't going to be one of these things. The description said, whatever, I watched it on Prime or something, did say it was science fiction.
Yeah.
it was part of it. So, and you were already talking about that. And I'm like, well, they said it was science fiction, but it wasn't a lot what George doesn't like. It wasn't a lot of the technical words and the machine and the Wayback Machine that you have to have all the widgets and whatnots that work together, and then you jump inside of it. It was just a different type of and the hypnotic time machine. A lot of that didn't work for me on a logical level, but it worked in the story to me.
But the flux capacitor, of course, does.
Yes, of course. Well, of course.
Wow. Damn.
That's
cruel.
They don't need fuel or whatever in the future. Just put your banana peel in there.
Yeah, exactly.
So there wasn't a lot to me that didn't work in Somewhere in Time, because I could just accept it. It was a story. But if I was trying to apply logic to it, I'm like, well, how could that possibly work? And then was it a dream? Was it only hypnosis? Or was it some reality? Well, apparently it was some reality to this old lady, because she came back how many years? 78
It's
years
eternal
later,
love. Darn you, it's eternal love.
Come on.
I guess.
All right, Roseanne, they've teed you up because nobody covered it. Go for it. What doesn't work in Somewhere in Time?
Well, in Somewhere in Time, unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't true, because I feel like if they just... Okay, so a few things to be clarified would make it work better. So Christopher Plummer is a problem for me, his character. Also, Christopher Plummer.
That's the answer. It's Christopher Plummer. What the hell is he doing in the film?
Well, first of all, and I love Christopher Plummer. I just want to be very clear.
Who doesn't?
Right, who doesn't?
He curled every woman's toes in Sound of Music.
I have Instagram posts of him in Sound of Music, whatever. But he's a problem. Like, okay, so since he's not her lover and he's just her manager, what? And then also, is he a fellow time traveler? We get hints of this. We don't get.
Really?
Yeah. He says.
I understand.
He says he's coming. He's coming. There's going to be this guy. It seems obvious, and it doesn't. Yeah, right.
And so I just felt like all we had to know was he's a fellow time traveler.
Yeah.
And so now she has these two time travelers in her life, and this is how she becomes attracted to getting the book and these kinds of things.
Yeah,
little stuff.
She just needed a cleanup on the script. Yeah, and Richard Matheson, it's his book. George, you read the book?
I did.
Is there any more about the guy? Is he a time traveler?
Oh, you're talking about the Christopher Plummer character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay. It's
odd.
odd.
They hint at it. So
how does he know then?
That's true.
No, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to go with where I see the hints. I also see the hints, obviously, and Bert says this with the old lady. I'm like, right, or Jane Seymour as an old lady, just like, okay. She read this book. She intuited that he was time traveling, and that's why his suit is right. And his suit is 15 years off. A scene I love. But anyway,
only 10.
Yeah, only 10. So those were the things that didn't work, which kind of breaks my heart, because I feel like little things, little tightening of the screws would have made it work perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have had a problem.
And it wouldn't have taken that much of a devastating rewrite. You wouldn't have to rewrite the whole thing like you would with Titanic.
Hardly at all.
I think my wife would have liked it better too if it was a little more explained.
Just a little.
Don't make her guess.
Again, Christopher Plummer's there, but why am I looking at him?
Yeah, we need one line. I know. I'm here too. I've known you. I knew you were coming.
I knew you were coming.
And hey, I'm from the future. I love you. I've come. Look at this. I love you. Look at this penny.
And he does have that nice line where he's like, "You have no idea how far I've traveled to be with you." Which,
yes.
I'll have to find a 1978 penny, but I don't have
she just needed a little tweak so her character makes more sense.
So we see, her complete journey, sort of when she does sort of desperately hand him that watch and say, "Come back to me."
Right.
Which is a much better line than "I'll never let go," which brings me to my main problem with Titanic, which is James fucking Cameron.
Watch it. Bert's a good Christian.
Sorry, Bert, I apologize. I've been waiting a long time to say that.
Hey, I
so you
watched
have to
Titanic.
forgive
There
me.
was a lot of
I
GDs in
already
there.
used,
Bert, I
I
apologize.
already used the big F word already, so sorry.
That's true.
Yes, I did. But I always forget Bert does not like it. So, all
Sorry,
right.
I will.
Well, I just don't. I choose not to use
I'll
them.
lock it up. But you
So-
don't understand my anger about James Cameron, Bert.
Yeah.
Anyway, go. All right, let us have it. Go. What did he do wrong, Roseanne?
Besides make the movie.
I was going to say, writes the dumbest scripts ever created by humans with brains and hands. Like, I just hate it, hate it, hate it plus hate it.
All right.
No.
It's got groaners. It's got
Such
groaners.
and
It's got
everybody
groaners for
has
sure.
them. And I
Yeah.
just think I don't care about any of these characters. That's why I say sound design. It's true because at least when they're, God, Frances Fisher, how could she be so good and Unforgiven and just the worst? But again, James Cameron makes decent performers bad and bad performers worse.
Yep.
And that's one
So
of
how
his
come Bernard
special
Hill and David
talents.
Warner were fine?
They were
Yeah.
wasted. Anyway, I loathe the script. I loathe his irritating, show-offy nature about his Titanic obsession. I loathe everything about it. And it's him. It's him at the helm. And there's no mistake that when he won that stupid Academy Award, it was nothing but groaners. That is him. He has just no concept of being an actual any kind of nuanced humanity in his characters. Obviously the best scenes, the reason he's good at aquatic scenes is because I think his brain is amphibious.
Okay.
So, do you like James Cameron?
How well do you like him?
Fine, I'm done.
Well, I can't talk that. I've already parlayed my thoughts with Bert, or jumped on his bandwagon with what I think doesn't work. I just think the cast is miserable and overall just corny casting. I think the script is weak, but I disagree. So I don't think James Cameron's the greatest writer, but he did Aliens. He's done True Lies. He's done films that I like a lot. But I think Titanic is definitely not his skill set or his wheelhouse, as they say today. It's just filled with terrible dialogue. I mean, it's some of the worst. Oh, he'll never that Picasso.
amount to a
He'll never
thing.
amount to anything. Like it's just like, oh, there's truth but no logic.
God.
It seems like you're watching a Swedish movie at that point. But I think the direction's very good. So I think his details, his quiet before all breaks loose is very good. Here's the deal. I always think I hate the movie until I sit down and watch it, and then I get sucked into it. I think it builds to a legitimately great climax where I go, yeah, it's tiresome.
I just don't agree with that. It's too exhaustingly long, and the payoff is not enough. I'm sorry. Yesterday I was watching, I'm just saying, like, I can't believe it's still going. And I know it's 3 hours, and I've seen it,
Yeah, right.
more than once, but I just think
I
that is a problem.
I will admit we don't need Billy Zane shooting at them.
For sure. And again, it just seems like, okay, we get it. They've multiple running through different passageways. I really don't feel that all of that passageway running was necessary. Like,
Yeah.
I get it.
That's
They
kind of a stock and
continuously are
trade.
saving each other. But even
Okay,
by the
but
time
unlike-
she's jumping off her ship to find him again, I just feel like this feels like stuff we don't need.
Oh, I like that part. I think that part's
I just
legit.
feel
I
like all
thought
she
that
had to
part's
say was, I'm staying here. That was it.
That's
I just
not
feel
as
like
exciting. It's
It's
exciting
not
when
that
she jumps.
exciting. I don't think it's that exciting. I think
All right.
then we go back, we loop, or talk about time loop. We go back and we do the same thing again. It's just like, oh God, there's more tunnels. It's too much of the
I know it could have been
same.
shortened, but I did read that he made it 2 hours and 40 minutes because it took the Titanic 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink.
Yeah, another reason why I hate James Cameron. Because of course he's going to do something like that so he can be a smartass about it and instead make me suffer.
All right. All right. Well, we kind of sort of have covered performance quite a bit in this discussion. So, it's part of my show. So, starting with you, George, we already know the answer: Leonardo DiCaprio or Christopher Reeve?
Do I have to answer that?
No. Anybody think
Thank you.
DiCaprio is better than Christopher Reeve? Raise your hand boldly. Nope. All right. Anybody think that Kate Winslet, who's a fine actress, and we all know this, it was better than Jane Seymour? Nope. All right.
I thought Jane Seymour was, I mean, in that just she was playing an actor on stage, and I thought that performance where she ad-libbed that line,
Yeah.
well, that was really good. Even though she was acting inside an acting job. I don't know.
Like, I always liked those two together. Finding out that they were really having a love affair makes it all that better. Like, wow, this really shows. I mean, she pulls off this corny scene. You're like, what is she doing? Oh my goodness! Like, it's really corny. Like, that's a corny scene, and she pulls it off for sure.
And his reaction,
Yeah.
which could have been corny, is actually like pretty effective.
Yeah. So I guess it's an obvious Billy Zane over Christopher Plummer, Roseanne.
I think so. Just at least Billy Zane has more of a purpose. And
Billy-
okay, Christopher Plummer looks bummed to be
Yeah.
in this role. Billy
Yeah.
Zane just looks like, sure.
And Christopher Plummer's still good looking. Like, he's in his mid-40s at this point, right?
Yeah, he's young.
Yeah.
He's still like, why is he playing the old doofus? He's still like leading man material
he's
here.
a good-looking dude.
Yeah. No, it's true.
So to me, he seems pretty bummed about that.
Yeah, and it's got this goatee.
Yeah, the goatee. So
God.
Billy Zane on that one.
Joe, you're rolling your eye. What? No?
It's just hard because like I don't like. I mean, I don't really care for either of these roles, and they're
Sure.
very similar roles ultimately.
Yeah.
Tying a guy up.
I mean, because Christopher Plummer's role had less screen time, I'm inclined to like that one better. But at the same time, like, I do think that Billy Zane probably acted it better.
He put a lot of gusto.
and-
I was actually,
Yeah.
as time goes by, I'm looking at Billy Zane going, I used to hate Billy Zane in the movie. And now I'm like, I think he's probably one of the best ones. He's infusing it with the right amount of mustache twirling melodrama that the role requires.
He reminded me I don't know why, but for some reason he reminded me a lot of, like, Prince Humperdinck
Yeah.
Yeah.
from Princess Bride. Like, a lot of that kind of same energy was what he was kind of channeling.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate that.
But I think that was defined. I mean, I didn't really understand the Plummer role.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, he's her agent, but does he have the hots for her? Why is he?
Doesn't
so
make
mad?
any.
Doesn't. Yeah.
God, man, you think I'm talking about sex? I'm talking about stardom. It's like, you're crazy.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get that. That's why I'm like, well, I guess the character was a little more developed in.
Yeah, no,
Titanic.
he's a one-note jerk, but at least we get where he's
yeah.
coming from, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. George, any thoughts or no? You just don't want to touch it.
What? Between
Billy Zane
Christopher-
versus Christopher Plummer. How'd you like Billy Zane's toupee? Did you like it? Did it work?
Come on, man, that rug was pretty darn good. That was Sean Connery as Bond in later years.
Level. Rug.
Better than better than James Kirk. William
They were
Shatner.
they were both kind of like, I don't want to say they were wallpaper because Billy Zane definitely had a purpose. I just didn't quite get the Christopher Plummer character, but I'm glad he didn't have a lot of screen time.
Yeah.
I just wish he had more. I wish
Really?
a few lines were written to where he's, as Roseanne and I said, just a fellow time traveler trying to thwart the guy. That would have made perfect sense. You think that's what's coming, and it doesn't happen. But as we catalog, okay, boy, let's can we just talk for a second more because I just can't stand her. It's Gloria Stuart. She's just awful. Like,
Wow.
like,
Okay.
I just want to say, hey, Cameron, you cast British Kate Winslet, get Maggie Smith, okay?
Right.
age Maggie Smith at the time. At the time, you know, she just
Maggie
died.
Smith
God
was
rest
fine,
her soul.
yeah.
But she should have been like, you don't cast somebody who seems nothing like Kate Winslet. Kate Winslet is British. You get somebody British. That's it. Like you're getting American cookie recipe Gloria Stuart for this part that they don't
Also,
seem
they're acting
like
like
the
there's
same
no
people.
old lady that could ever not seem like this. And,
Yeah.
you know, so when she's it's so ghastly as she's looking on to all their faces as she's talking about the most erotic moment of her life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's literally 4 zillion older actresses who could have pulled this off. She is not one of them.
And why would she say it?
What again?
Why would she say it? Why would she even tell them? She's from her heyday was 1914. She's going to not tell them this.
Although she is so baffled, I do like loathe the fact that she comes with all this luggage and stuff like that. Like, what are they trying to establish about her? That she never got over her sense of luxury. She has to go around with all these framed pictures of herself. Like, talk about ill-defined character.
Yeah.
Like,
well, she seems like a batty old lady. Where Kate Winslet, you just think,
Sure.
I don't believe Kate Winslet grew up to be this woman.
right.
Just not a chance.
She had that experience, and she's this, just like,
Yeah.
Well,
No,
yeah,
for
it's
sure.
like you said, Roseanne. I thought instantly of wait. They're trying to say she travels like she traveled on the Titanic with
right.
80 different bags
Yeah.
or whatever. Why I don't
Plus,
know. But
somebody who's 102 years old going on a helicopter and a ship, that would kill her. It would just kill
For
her.
sure.
Let's. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it does kill her, but it just seems like okay. You have to make more of the fact of what an effort she's taking to do this.
Yeah, that it would be this massive effort, and that
Yeah.
you know, and then finally, when she's done unburdening the ocean of her heart, she dies.
Yeah, she just dies.
She just dies,
It's
and,
just,
and that's all fine. But I
I
just
just
thought,
hate all
and
that.
she doesn't. My wife said, "Oh, she didn't go to her current husband. She went to DiCaprio."
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, is her husband standing in the crowd clapping?
Right, yeah. What about her? Maybe her kids aren't dead yet. But,
Yeah, exactly. Again,
similar endings too to these
it's
movies.
such a tone deaf script. All she has to do is get pregnant. Okay, if you like, I don't want to see the sex scene. Let's just say, like, somewhere in time, you fade away to the candles in the right after she
and get to the chicken eating.
he draws.
Yes.
He draws her. They make love. She gets pregnant. She never marries again. She's another woman of mystery. But they saying she's a recluse and all this. But she has kids and grandkids. It just seems also stupid. It's so stupidly written. I don't even know why I like the movie. You guys are talking me out. The more I think about it, I always think I hate it, and then
don't overanalyze it. Don't overanalyze.
But the thing
but
is,
that's what we do
again,
here.
I guess we're pretty much done talking. But I will say this: the film always draws me in. Where I enjoy it. I enjoy watching it, as hokey as it is.
That's because you like big shiny things. Like
I do.
that.
Hey, what do you got against big shiny things? You like dirty, muddy things? I'm better than dirty, muddy things.
Hey, talk about muddy. I mean, that's the production design of Somewhere in Time. That's
Yeah.
the color scheme.
That's the
like
grain.
Mud. Yeah.
It's the muddy. I think they were throwing mud on the lens. It's so grainy. I mean, we're watching it in HD and it's still grainy.
Right. So I just think, yes, I do like dirty, muddy things. If that's the payoff and not.
Well,
the
that's what
shiny
happens
thing.
in hypnotizing time travel. It's just kind of grainy.
Grainy.
No, it's definitely a low budget movie. You can see it. I mean, you can see any scene when they're outside at night. It's so grainy. Like, okay, they did.
That's what most of it is filmed during the day. You see
Yeah, I
that.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know. I figured that was on purpose. I don't know. I didn't overanalyze that too much, but
No, I just noticed that.
limitations of technology. I guess.
But again, if you look at The Godfather, or any movie from that era that has been restored, it looks like $1 million. And I think they're looking at this. Obviously, it's a bad transfer, and they don't give a crap. Universal or whatever, they don't. But it's a perennial. People watch this movie. It's a big kind of cult classic. So I'm surprised they haven't given it a better like once over and make it a little more presentable.
If anyone's listening, do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Please.
people like the film. I mean, make it look a little cleaner. But anyway, all right. We've already said John Barry versus. Oh, well, let's get it officially. Roseanne, John Barry versus James Horner. Neither are at their best.
Right, I agree, and I don't, obviously I love other John Barry scores way more, but I will say John Barry over James Horner's just embarrassing, sentimental twaddle.
He won an Oscar for
I
it.
know.
Yes, he did.
Hey, so did the film.
Yeah, I know.
When I saw how many Academy Awards this movie won, I was like, were there no good movies that year?
Pulp Fiction, or not Pulp
There
Fiction,
were.
Jackie Brown came out that year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
plenty.
it is insane. Yeah, the thing about Titanic winning the Oscars is it's just a moment in time, but this film still gets like 20-year retrospectives and the like. I mean, people still love it, so it's one of those films that just people like Armageddon and Bad Boys. And don't forget Hook. Hook! People love Hook.
Oh,
I don't even understand that. But anyway, let's not get
I
started.
can't watch that one.
Right.
Yeah,
Awful.
yeah.
John Barry, James Horner.
Did anybody want? George doesn't like this topic. Anyone else want to comment on the two scores?
I honestly didn't notice it in Somewhere in Time.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm like, was there music in that? But I didn't
Yeah,
go back and
there is.
rewatch it. So.
Yeah.
Well, the Rock Mountain Mob.
Well, yeah, that I heard a
Yeah.
lot, but
Rhapsody on a Theme of Peggy.
yeah,
but-
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We looked that up, or my wife even recognized that. But I'm like, okay, well, but was that considered? I'm like,
Well,
that's
he
not an
we-
original score.
But he
That's
weaves
something
it into
else,
the score with ease.
He does a variation of it throughout.
Yeah.
That's pretty simple for him.
So I guess if you want to, I guess with that understanding, I'd like that one better.
Yeah.
Joe, same thing.
Same thing. Somewhere in Time, I think the music, it may not be the best, but I think it weaves into the story. It still has its sort of dreamlike, atmospheric kind of feel to it without taking you out of it too much. I think it gets the mood and the tone of the movie really well. I think that comparatively, like James Horner's score is just listening to the music alone at certain points made me roll my eyes. Because I'm like, this is so, like, I mean, there's a lot of cheesy elements to the movie, but, like, the music being that cheesy also was just like, I can't believe that this is.
Well, he
they're
had.
doing.
So I was high on James Horner after he did Apollo 13 and Braveheart. So I ran out and bought that score before I even saw the movie, and I immediately went, "What the hell is this?" And I will say that at least in the film, now it's years later, and I listen to it, and I go, "Boy, this is awful. It's just the worst. I just hate all the bagpipes and all of it. It's just awful. It doesn't fit at all." But I will say, when I first saw the film, after hearing the score a few times when I bought the CD, I think it works better in the film than it does as an album. Like, usually, like, most people go, "Oh, how can you even listen to a score?" Sometimes you put in a score and it can elevate. Like, I have plenty of scores that you go, "Wow, that's a really good score," and it was in a terrible movie. This is the opposite. It's a terrible score in a pretty good movie in terms of, execution. But anyway, I can't stand that score. I can't stand that song. Burt Brown, how you manage to live your life without hearing that song? And I had heard that song immediately because that was the first track on the soundtrack.
I just didn't get sick of it. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good.
I remember going,
when I first heard it.
"What the hell's this?"
Oh, whoa. No wonder people like that.
And I never imagined it was good. When I bought the score like way ahead, because at that point I was full on film score collector. I remember going, "This can't possibly be a hit. This is one of the dumbest songs I've ever heard." And next thing you know, it's the biggest hit of all time.
And it was only played over the credits. I guess I read somewhere he didn't want any songs like that played during the movie.
Yeah. Well, that's
I mean,
'cause
they weaved in.
he's a man of
it's way
impeccable.
They certainly
classier that
weaved in
way.
the
Man of
Yes.
impeccable taste.
Yeah, they certainly weaved in the music itself, just not the words.
Yeah.
Right.
You
You
know,
can only
Celine
do it
Dion
so
didn't
many times in
come out of the
flute
thing and start singing.
And bagpipe.
and bagpipes, for
Yeah.
sure.
But again, so James Horner was writing the script he wrote the Titanic script to Braveheart, apparently loved the Braveheart score, so he just wants a Braveheart rehash. But it's like Braveheart does not fit at all. This doesn't work at all. Like this doesn't sound romantic. I mean, James Horner could write a romantic theme. I don't think any of his themes are particularly good in that film. Anyway, all right. Well, let's hit it hard. The screenplays. No, it's not.
No. No.
So finally, I think James Cameron does a very good job directing. How does Jeannot Szwarc do? George Young, you like the film quite a bit. How does his direction strike you?
Well, I thought a very efficient movie. I think I even sent that to you in a text. I thought it was very lean and not confusing at all. But, again, big fan of Jack Finney and Richard Matheson. By the way, the inside joke is that the professor's name that he goes to see
Is Professor Matheson. Oh, Finney.
Professor Finney.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because he and Richard Matheson were friends.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know who you're talking. Every time you keep mentioning Jack Finney, I know you mentioned in our previous podcast. I just don't know what he wrote. What did he write?
Let's see. Time After Time. I'm sorry. Not
Oh,
Time
no,
After
Nicholas Meyer wrote that.
No, you're talking about the movie. I'm talking about
No,
the book.
Nicholas Meyer wrote the book. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. He did write
Carl
the book.
Alexander. I think
That's
Carl
right.
Alexander wrote the
That's
book.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
Jack Finney has written a ton of time travel books and short stories. He's actually from Marin County,
Oh,
which I guess makes sense.
have you met him?
I saw one of his interviews at the film festival. Again, very shortly before he passed away.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
So thought it was a very good directing job, and Cameron was his usual bloated mess. So that's
Come
my take.
on. Come on. Talking about the director of Aliens.
He made $1
And
billion.
Lies.
How could that be bad?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Joe, any thoughts on the direction of either film?
I think pretty much everybody else has said it. I think that Somewhere in Time, the direction is pretty to the point. It's not trying to do anything too special or, anything. That's what it is.
Well, who's the artist he emulates? Roseanne, you know this? The artist he keeps emulating throughout the film with all these crowds of people on the. There's these shots they're reminiscent of an artist. Which are a French artist? with all the
Like
people.
Durat
Like a
or
Monet
whatever.
or something?
No,
It's
like
not
George
Monet. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
You can see him being a little fancy, like when they're out strolling along on the green, and it looks like a painting. So there are moments of sort of artistic vision in the film.
Yeah. But it's not. I feel like with Titanic, it was just a lot of everything. I mean, it was just too much in a lot of cases. And that goes into, it feeds into things like the screenplay and just the overall vision for it, the sort of attempts at things like foreshadowing or these sort of throwaway historical lines to be like, oh yes, of course, we're at this point in history. Just for all the viewers, like, I don't know who Freud is.
Right.
Okay. Or, just little things like that where it's like, okay, like, I get it. This is a historical piece. Yes, I get it. They have a ton of silverware. It's just like, these are just things and shots and like, and oh, we get it. These people down here, they're having fun doing dancing and she's doing, I guess, Irish dancing or something similar. It's just like, it's such weird exaggerated attempts at getting points across that really it's like too much. Like back up a little bit, less is more. But I don't think that's in his vocabulary. So.
Oh.
Well, he's definitely not a subtle director.
Well,
But I find it entertaining no matter what. Bert, thoughts on direction? Either one?
I guess Titanic was, blockbuster direction. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
Like an Alien or like a Terminator type movie. And then the other one, Somewhere in Time, was like when I think back to movies from the 70s. Now again, we didn't go to the movies when we were kids, or to those adult movies that were not mature theme, but they didn't interest kids. Romance wouldn't get the teenagers out to the theater,
Right.
but the adults would go, and I thought it fit that. It told its story. It didn't seem disjointed. There was nothing like that. So I thought, although it's a totally different style than that blockbuster style, it worked. Who would I say is better? Well, the director got a better performance out of Reeves and what's her name, than he did than Cameron did out of the cast of Titanic. Got a better performance.
Yeah, that's
so,
casting. I mean, I guess that's that he wins the day just by casting it brilliantly.
Yeah.
Though he does a bad job with that French lady.
Wait. Okay, so I guess I never understood that the director has final say over who is chosen.
Director decides everything. And if the producer's deciding who the cast is, then the director's pushed around.
I would think a good director would get a performance they wanted out of anybody if they were really good. No matter who was cast. If they wanted a certain look and this person looked like that, but they weren't quite the caliber they wanted, well, they'd work with them to get them to that caliber to present it on the film.
Sometimes
Maybe
it's just
I don't
not possible.
understand it that way. So
I think sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you cast badly, knowing your story is knowing your characters is knowing who fits the bill, and I think that he wins just by getting Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve.
Right.
He wins just because he just cast brilliantly, though poor Christopher Plummer. All right, Roseanne, any thoughts on direction before we call it a day?
No.
We know her answer.
So, anybody going to recommend Titanic? Raise your hand if you will recommend Titanic to anybody.
Never.
I would.
I'll recommend it.
But it was, the Titanic sank on my birthday like 53 years before I was born.
Wait,
April
is
15th.
that's my birthday.
April 15th.
High five, Bert.
Yeah, there we go.
I always tell people, hey, Lincoln died on our birthday too.
Yes, Lincoln died and the Titanic sank on April 15th.
You got it.
All right, raise your hand if you're going to watch or recommend Somewhere in Time.
I am.
I could to the right
I thought
person.
you didn't. Oh, okay. All right. Well, we all
right
I would
person.
definitely tell people, like, hey,
I didn't
give
hate
this a
it.
chance again.
Those listening, I've got a few movies. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Somewhere in Time, and I don't know. Night of the Hunter, where you just remember every freaking shot. And I don't know why Somewhere in Time is one of those, because it just is. I'm like, man, and I'm watching it the first time a month ago. I still astounded of like, I remember this movie in its entirety. So I don't know that's a good sign, because most movies I forget something. Even Titanic, I always forget that. Oh yeah, Kathy Bates is in this.
Yeah. I didn't know Bill Paxton was in it. I'm like, wait.
Poor Bill Paxton, God love him. I forgot to even mention him in the credits. I always forget he's in the film while I'm watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, he does not matter in this film.
It's because you just never let it in, Gino.
Touche. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this expedition. Listeners at home, don't forget to like and subscribe. Even though I don't give a crap. I don't care. Don't like and subscribe. Screw you.
Wow.
Do it in spite of Gino.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to do the opposite. We hate Titanic. We're going against the grain right off the bat. We all hate Titanic.
Wow.
I don't. I still love it. My soul's as deep as a woman's in the ocean.
That blue diamond at the bottom.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Fabulous Film and Friends. Copyright 2024, a Bel Air Films production.